Hello, my name is Allison Stewart. The film to be discussed is Rashomon. My extract begins at 7 minutes 30 seconds and runs for 5 minutes. In the opening shot, we see the woodcutter beginning to tell the tale of how he found the scene of the murder of the samurai. Your time starts in 3, 2. Rashomon was directed by Akira Kurosawa and released August 25, 1950 by Dalio Film Productions. It is a mystery crime film that discusses the 4 different perspectives of a samurai, a bandit, a woman, and a woodcutter of a murder that occurs in a forest. This extract is from the very beginning of the film, as the audience first learns about the terrible event that the woodcutter was talking about in the first 7 minutes of the film, bringing the ambiguity to a close. The scene further brings the audience into the mindset of different ideas of truth, and how different perspectives of the same event will be told to preserve the honor of those telling the tale. I really like this extract due to the use of camera movement and editing, as it struck me as interesting and made me want to learn more about why Kurosawa did what he did in the segment of the film. The segment helps to push Kurosawa's intent on discussing on how the truth can change with perspective, using post-World War II Japan as lens of society to look through. Kurosawa commented on this, saying, "Human beings are unable to be honest with themselves about themselves. They cannot talk about themselves without embellishing. The script portrays such human beings, the kind who cannot survive without lies to make them feel they are better than they really are." As the extract first begins, we're going to move over to our textual analysis. The first noticeable aspect is that Kurosawa utilizes to push his intent is the use of location. As the scene cuts from the glum, rainy, and crumbling capital of Rashomon, the audience finds themselves in a sunny, albeit shady forest. This forest contains a thick undergrowth that winds obscure and plentiful paths. Then, the location shifts again towards the end of the extract to the brightly lit and highly exploded courtroom. The initial location, with the heavy rain and crumbling stature, could symbolize Japanese society in post-World War II era, with many of the traditions and society metaphorically and physically crumbled. This is lens that Kurosawa pushes to utilize his main intention in the film, which will be discussed later in the oral. The shade of the forest that obscures the sunlight was done purposely by Kurosawa, who stated, "At the time Rashomon was being made, it was still one of the taboos of cinematography to film directly into the sun. The introductory section in particular, which leads the viewer through the light and shadow of the forest into a world where the human heart loses its way, was truly magnificent camera work." In addition to this, forests often have many paths that can all lead to a wonderful place, or they can all lead to terrible places. This relates back to his intent to retell the idea that truth can change with perspective, and that humans cannot be honest with themselves. In contrast to this, the courtroom appears to be brightly lit, with no appearance of shade anywhere in the frame. This again relates back to Kurosawa's intent, as the courtroom is attempting to expose the truth and bring it out in the open, while the forest obscures the truth within the shadows. This is heavily related to his intent. In addition to location changes, another mise-en-scène element that Kurosawa uses is heavy camera movement and various shots in the extract to push his intent. The cinematographer of Rashomon was Kazuo Miyagawa, and Kurosawa was amazed at his work, commenting regretfully, "Delighted as I was with Miyagawa's work, it seems I forgot to tell him when I said to myself, 'wonderful,' I guess that I thought I said wonderful to him at the same time." Miyagawa utilizes a mix of different shot types, like extreme wide shots, OTSs, and close-ups to have effects of walking through the forest. There's sparse use of close-ups, however, as the only time they're used is when the flow of the scene changes. Firstly, when the camera quickly cuts to the shaded face of the woodcutter, and secondly, when the woodcutter pauses and sees the samurai's wife's hat sitting on the bush, which eventually leads him to discovering the crime. This can be seen on the screen, the first one on the left and the second one on the right. These shots both set the rhythm for the shots that appear afterwards, with the first setting the pace for the woodcutter's walk, and the second halting his everyday walk and life to find a horrendous crime. This not only emphasizes how shocked the woodcutter is when he finds the crime, but also pushes the intent of Kurosawa to describe the different perspectives of truth. All the shots for the first 2.5 minutes of the scene are filled with constant movement, which again feels though you're pushing through the undergrowth with the woodcutter and experiencing his everyday life. Kurosawa commented on this, saying, "Because I want to produce in the audience the same feeling the characters have of being trapped." This movement stops when the woodcutter stops to observe a hat, and then continues again until he finds other objects on the ground, acting as a sick scavenger hunt to find the murderer. This emphasizes Kurosawa's intent to preserve the truth that humans will tell others that is varied from other perspectives of that event. Kurosawa uses one interesting camera angle, and which also pushes intent, notably viewed when the woodcutter first sees the body of the samurai. Instead of the audience seeing the body, all we see are the hands, extending in agony towards the woodcutter, which not only frighten him, but also the audience. This different perspective provides somewhat of an allegory for the entire film, with the various perspective of the crime being observed through the audience's eyes, which might frighten some. Thus, this pushes Kurosawa's director's intent. Another important element that is utilized in the extract from Rashomon is the use of editing. During production, Kurosawa always had 2 or 3 cameras at different distances and different angles, as what he found conventional shooting required to stop the action. To stop the action after which was intolerable. Thus, Kurosawa had multiple shots to pull from, which allowed him to edit on the action. Each cut creates a feeling as if every take is a long take rather than multiple edits. A good example of this is when the camera switches to an OTS shot of the woodcutter. The leaves smack the camera lens, which helps immerse the audience, but also readies them for the next shot, which is a side close-up of the woodcutter. Slightly blurred by the leaves, this can be seen on screen. This cut feels smooth because the movement of the leaves flows from shot to shot. The only time that there is a cut that does not flow with the scene is when there is a sudden cut to zoom on the object strewn on the ground, right before the woodcutter stumbles across the body of the samurai. This pushes the intent of Kurosawa to emphasize the different perspectives of truth. During the editing, Kurosawa elaborated on his process, saying, "I cut the film freely and spliced together the pieces which have caught the action most forcibly, as it's flying from one piece to another." Another important element that is utilized in the extract from Rashomon is the use of music. Kurosawa was heavily influenced by Western music rather than more traditional Japanese music, which is noted heavily. When he designed his sound, Kurosawa commented, "From the moment I've been directing a film, I'm thinking about not only the music, but the sound effects as well. Even before the camera rolls, along with all the other things I consider, I decide what kind of sound I want. I use different theme music for each character or for different groups of character." The beat of the march that is utilized in this extract assists in emphasizing the walk of the woodcutter and is timed somewhat with the cuts between moving shots. The music hesitates, however, when the rhythm of the walk is interrupted by the woman's hat and then becomes slightly louder. This process continues until the music explodes in a cacophony of drums, strings, and brass right before the woodcutter observes the dead samurai. This not only assists in promoting emotional reaction from the audience, but pushes Kurosawa's theme and intent in discussing the different perspective of truth through the lens of post-Japanese World War II society. There are hardly any sound effects utilized in the scene, with a lack of crunching leaves and animal sounds, which creates a sense of isolation and peace that is harshly broken by the inclusion of the atrocity of the crime. We're going to move on to social-cultural context. In many ways, Rashomon represents much of the Japanese mindset in a post-World War II society. The film was released 5 years after Japan's defeat, along with Germany and Italy in World War II, as well as dealing with the effects of the atomic bomb and released at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thirdly, Japan was being invaded by American culture, and much of the older traditional Japanese culture was being eradicated because of this invasion. An acclamation of these three aspects helped Kurosawa propel his intent of discussing on how the truth can change with perspective. Many of the Japanese during the war believed they were doing right in the face of the Western societies as preferred their own culture. This perspective, however, in the eyes of their nation, was not correct, who saw their actions as atrocities rather than a feat of honor. Akira Kurosawa was often censored during the war because he criticized Japan's militarism. In addition to this, his target audience was post-World War II Japanese people. And then this also, since it's a mystery crime film, it does break some genre conventions. There's little to no evidence about how the crime was committed, which is a general genre trope. And also in this time period, femme fatales were super popular, and so the woman here is often seen as weak compared to the usual femme fatale. And that's the end of my oral. I'm done.